back to the Getting to Know Denver podcast. We're excited today because we're going to talk about a debate that a lot of investors have on their minds right now, and that is whether they should buy a duplex or a single family home, and trying to figure out, if one unit makes sense or two units make sense, and breaking that down for you. So if you're interested in investing in real estate, welcome back. We're going to talk about this, and hopefully this will help shed some light on which option might be better for you when you really evaluate cash flow, appreciation, tax benefits, and long-term wealth. So we're going to kick it off and just throw out the question, why does this debate even matter? Why are we even talking about this today?
Well, many investors only look at price and not strategy. So property types can impact cash flow. So you got maintenance, appreciation, financing, and tenant profile. So when you do like a duplex or multi-unit, right, you're going to have more leases, more headaches, right, a higher hassle factor with it, but you have an opportunity to have more cash flow. And typically with like a duplex, you're probably going to have a higher turnover versus single family. You typically have like families that are living there with kids and they want to kind of be established in school, so they have a little bit more commitment to the area. So there is no real universal winner. It kind of depends on what your goals are and what you're working towards. So let's kind of define like what the options are. So you've got duplex versus single family.
Yeah, so a duplex is one building with two separate units. So you have the possibility of having two tenants and two income streams if you're renting out both of those units. And then you could also have the option to be owner occupied in one side in some cases. So then you're living in one, renting out the other, which is pretty cool.
I love that idea, by the way.
Yeah.
It's an awesome one.
And then a single family rental is just a standalone house rented to one household. This often attracts longer term tenants, usually kind of like families or older, and simpler management structure on that one as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And like there's more duplex options in Denver and Inglewood, in our neck of the woods. Like you'll have Inglewood is like the biggest duplex friendly, multi-unit friendly city that we have in Colorado, and then the Denver metro area. And then you get out to some of the other suburbs that are just mainly like Littleton, Highlands Ranch, Parker, Castle Rock. Like you don't see hardly any multifamily zoning. And so it's super hard to find anything like that. Old Littleton, you'll find a little bit. And like there's some areas in Aurora that have a little bit. Thornton actually has a fair amount. And Denver proper does too. Like there's all kinds of zoning. Denver's the most scattered by far as like different zoning that they have there. And so
like Longmont too, just kind of more up north.
Yep, more towards Boulder. You'll get some options too because you get closer to college towns, and they love multifamily there because they can make a nice profit on students and that sort of thing. But there's the cash flow debate, right? That's what you have to think about is like what makes sense. And if you're buying like a duplex, right? If I'm a person that doesn't want to take a lot of risks, I'm probably staying away from a duplex. It's if you're a person that's buying for cash flow and you want more upside, then like Brock said, I'm like a duplex would be a really attractive purchase for an investor like that. And you mentioned a couple things, right? Like we've got vacancy risks are higher if you have two different units, twice the chance of someone leaving or not being able to afford the payment or whatnot, twice the chance of someone wrecking the place also, right? Having a really bad tenant. So you just have more risk there, I think. And so the utility split can be awkward sometimes. If you have everything on separate meters, separate water, separate gas and electric, then it's easy. But if you don't, then sometimes you have to like just include that in the billing, but then maybe someone might run way over and take super long showers, and then it's like kind of awkward. So like there's stuff to think about, just like logistics that you have to complicate things, that you have to have a very tight listing agreement with a duplex to make sure that you're not like one person's not invading on the other. You've got a really, good understanding of what the rules are in that space. Maybe it's a party wall, which is just like a set of rules between governing the shared wall, or it's an actual HOA. I've seen both on those, but more complication, I think, as far as that goes. But with more complication and difficulty, sometimes comes more cash flow, which is kind of nice too.
Yeah, and that vacancy sword kind of cuts both ways too. Mm-hmm. If you have two people in a duplex, if you have vacancy in one, you can still have someone who's renting and still paying. So it can be a benefit in that sense.
True.
But you also have the risk of just, vacancy in both of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say definitely duplexes. Typically, you're going to have more cash flow, but it's coming with more complication, more oversight, typically higher maintenance. So it really just case by case basis depends on what you're looking for. And then also a lot of those duplexes in Inglewood are in the economic opportunity zone that we made a video on.
Yeah.
So that makes a difference too.
Yeah, absolutely. Which becomes like not taxable, and there's some really good benefits to that because taxes were one of the things we mentioned right in the intro. There's appreciation, and there's cash flow. Like those are the three big things that you want to evaluate, and what your goals are, plays a big part in what your decision making should be. So so I think duplexes tend to win in income potential oftentimes, but then the numbers, like really, we were talking about it before we started this, right? Like it's hard to just say like duplexes are always better for this or single family is always better. It has to be the right deal, and you win the deal when you buy the house, not later when you count on appreciation happening later, because you never know what's going to happen in the future, right? You win when you buy at the right price and with the right payment. And so I think that's important to reiterate too. We always look at, what an investor oftentimes will look at a cap rate, right, is something that people really focus on. And that just basically shows you how good of a deal it is based on their net operating income and the expenses that they have on the property. And then it basically in our market, a good cap rate right now is like 6. A great cap rate would be like 8 to 10 would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like buy that now, right? But anything that's like 5, 4, 3% cap rate may not be that exciting for an investor, and maybe something that you just pass on. And so really running the numbers on that is a really good idea. And, looking at your overall net revenue of the place minus your depreciation, like your expenses on the place, like how much it's going to cost you, basically divided by the price of the unit, how much you're going to pay for it. That's how you determine that. And if you look at it that way, you'll be able to see whether it's a duplex or a single family, if that investment is going to be a good investment and it's worth taking the risk on. Because any investment, whether it's real estate or whether it's stock market or whatever, obviously there's risk involved. And so you have to really self-evaluate what is your risk tolerance and line that up with what your goals are to succeed. And I think people that are on the younger side, like Gabby's age, coming fresh out of college a few years ago, like those people are like, yeah, sign me up for risk because I got plenty of time to correct it if it fails, right? Or
I have nothing. I don't have a whole lot to lose, so let's do this.
Nothing to lose. Let's go.
Now comes where he picks on the other side of the equation.
Well, I'm not going to mention anyone at the table.
Okay.
But, if you're on the middle age side, is that fair? Middle age. Then maybe you're thinking a little differently, right? I know I am. Like just passing the 40 bridge. Like I'm definitely thinking about like you have to protect what you have, right? And then also plan for the future, but maybe not, gamble the whole field on one investment, when you've got a lot to lose in those cases for some people. So I think a lot of that matters, where you're at in life and also how good the actual investment is, even more so than duplex versus single family.
And also what percentage of your net worth does this investment represent, right? So that's
I'd also say as an investor, don't trust sellers on cap rate. I've seen people advertising and they're like, it's a 10% cap rate. And it's like, okay, but you're putting your maintenance costs as 6 nickels and you have 0% vacancy and you're renting it for twice as much as you really could. So you don't want to do those calculations on your own.
Totally. Getting an actual rent roll so you can see what the rent has actually been instead of what they say it is or could be. Because a lot of people will say like, hey, here's the projected rent, but it's never been rented for that after it's been renovated. So you don't know.
And that's $500 a month more than anything else in the 2-mile radius. So, but it could be. So
yeah, you got to be careful with that. And then seeing like real numbers on expenses. A good sound investor probably has a checking account that they're running everything through on that investment. And so it's easy to just pull, all the account. If a property manager is managing the property, they usually have a rent roll, and they also have like all the costs and expenses on the property all together that they can send you. So, but not everyone has it all, put together like a tight ship, right? Sometimes it's like all over the place and scattered, and like especially first time investors that don't really know what they're doing, they make so many mistakes, and those are the people that try to unload a bad investment sometimes. So you just have to be aware of that may not be the best thing for you. So then we talk about the other end of the debate is cash flow, or excuse me, appreciation and resale.
Yeah. So what do we get for resale when it comes to, so appreciation? Single family homes typically appreciate a little bit more in comparison, right? Because there's a larger buyer pool when you're selling. So you've got more demand there. Owner occupied, that typically drives a stronger resale demand. And let's see, duplex portion. So typically duplexes and multi-door units are geared towards the investor. So you got a smaller pool, but Jackson, kind of liked what you're saying is sometimes their numbers don't really align with what reality is, right? So you got to have some type of acumen to be able to go through and review those types of things. This is where that like rare opportunity where someone who's young could buy a duplex and live in one side and rent out the other and really cash flow because they're kind of still involved in it, but it's a pretty low risk. I think that's probably like the one caveat where there's not a big pool of people that are willing to sacrifice that much, but I think that's probably the strongest case for it. So
yeah, well, let's lay out that scenario, right? So like, let's say you're approved for a $700,000 house, right? In Denver right now, what that looks like if you're in the city, maybe that's only 1,500 square feet in a townhouse. But if you're like outside in the suburbs, in some of these first layer suburbs, maybe that's a house with a nice 2-car garage, like 2,400 square feet above grade with a basement finish. And it's like a 4-bed, 3-bath house, right? So if you can afford that, but then you're basically saying like, instead of taking up all that living space, especially if it's like a young professional, it's just me and my spouse or just me, single, then that person is saying like, I'll take half the living space, rent out the other half. Someone else is paying half of my mortgage for me, right? Or maybe even more than half, depending on the deal. And you're basically like, that person's paying like all your interest on the loan in some cases, right? So you're just paying yourself back with the remaining like payment is going to principal in a lot of cases. And that can turn out to be a really, really strong deal for a lot of people. If you have if you're in that time of life where you can do that all day long, that's a great way to go, because the next step is if you move out and now let's say you do want more space after a couple of years of doing that, now you can rent both units out. You've got a great duplex and you only paid, in some cases, like with lending laws, if you're buying as an investor, you don't live in either unit. You have to buy that home as an investor with an investor loan, which is like 20% down, right? But if you're buying as an owner occupant, I can buy at FHA if I want to. I could buy a VA with 0 down, or FHA 3.5% down, or conventional 5% down. Like you could put way less cash investment into it and have
you get a better rate.
Yeah, you get a great rate, like usually about 5/8 lower than what your investor rate is right now, and you're able to have one side covered for you so that you're making up a lot of that mortgage payment. So I just think that's one of the best plays you can do, and I've seen people do it with triplexes, with fourplexes, and do extremely well, and have instead of buying that like luxurious single family house for $800,000 in Highlands Ranch, they buy a fourplex in Inglewood and live in one unit, and now they have 3 rental properties that then turns into 4 rental properties, and then they go buy that great place that they want to buy.
Yeah, with a 40% down payment because they've banked all this equity after living there.
Yeah.
So I think really the key picture is the more you're willing to sacrifice, the more it'll financially gain you, right? So at 25 years old, if you want an $800,000 single family home with a 1-acre lot, you can do it. It's going to cost you a lot of money, but yes, that home's going to appreciate and you're going to pay it off, but you could do the same thing with the duplex and then turn that into a rental property. That could cash flow you a couple grand a month, 5 years down the road. So that's I think we've seen some other properties where they've had a house with a basement that's a separate entrance, so that could be separately rented, an ADU above the garage, and these people are buying these almost $2 million properties, living in the garage. So they're living in a 700-800 square foot apartment essentially above a garage, but they're renting out the house, and in 10 years that asset is completely paid for.
Yeah.
So if you lay out that math,
incredible.
if you could sacrifice that for 10 years, well, when you're 21 to 31, it's kind of easy to be able to do something like that. And now you've got over a $2 million asset completely paid for. That's going to cash flow and benefit you for quite a while. So
That's a life changer.
yeah,
Like you have a unit that's a $600,000 duplex that you buy 10 years ago, and now all of a sudden it's paid off. Like that place is probably renting for $5,000 a month, right? Like $2,500 per unit. It's probably worth about 10 years later. It could be worth $900,000 now, and now you have all this equity in
and you
this
get a
place
monthly cash flow.
plus monthly cash flow, and it's paid off. Like that's crazy. If you can manage to do that, like that sets you ahead so far. And people don't realize like how valuable that is. I wish more people would be going for these types of options, but not many people know about them. So it's that's why we're doing this, to educate
And
people.
the other reason why this is such a key topic right now, especially in Denver, is so they aren't making any more land. There's only a certain amount of areas that people want to live in.
Mm-hmm.
So Denver's new initiative is to get rid of some of these older homes that are kind of, they're just knocking them down and infilling the lots and building up. So they're rezoning a lot of the residential stuff to zone up. So they're trying to build more duplexes on lots that used to have just a single family home on it. So you're starting to see this more and more and more. So it's going to become way more prevalent where you're seeing a higher density of homes. So I think Inglewood just recently had an initiative where actually the residents actually voted it down to where they're not going to go with this higher density population, but other cities are kind of starting to increase that. So it's going to become more and more common.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah, and I called my dad to do this in Provo, Utah. I was like, I could live in this unit. I could rent this one out. This is going to be awesome. Interest rates were at 3% at the time. I was like, Dad, this is a great idea. Like I've got this all mapped out. Like I can cash flow this unit. It'll pay for 75% of our payment, and I can live for cheap in this unit. And you know what my dad said? He said there's an 11th commandment in the 10 commandments, thou shalt not cosign. That was what he said, because I didn't have 2 years of work history. And so I was like, dang it, Dad.
That's the 11th commandment.
I
that one.
wish I would have, like, if we would have done that, that was 2009, 10? No, 10 or 11. So that's like 15 years ago, right? We could have had that thing paid off by now, but we probably would be living in Utah. And my dad knew that. He was like, he did not want me buying property in Utah because he thought we would stay there. So selfishly, he wanted us to be here for all his grandkids to be here, which I don't blame him. So you live and you learn, but maybe I should have pushed harder on him and told him that commandment is not real.
Yeah.
That would have been good.
See if that's on the tablets.
I've read the Bible, Dad. It's not there. Yeah. Then we talk about management, like tenant management, and how that like shakes out to this whole thing. Because most property managers are going to charge you like 8% per unit, 8 to 10%. 10's probably more common. But if you have multiple, then they'll slide to 8 in a lot of cases, is what we've seen. And so how does that factor in as far as like your decision between a duplex and a single family?
Yeah, so for single family, you're typically going to have only one tenant. They're usually going to be there for longer. Typically, that's going to be less headaches, less hassle. And like you said, if you're using a property manager, it's going to be less expensive. They're going to be taking, let's say, 10% versus 16%. With the duplex, you're going to have 2 tenants, which is twice as many problems. Typically going to have more maintenance things that come up. You can have disputes between tenants because of the shared party wall. And if you're having a property manager, it's going to be more expensive to have them manage that because they'll be doing more work. So whether you're doing it yourself, it's just going to be more work on you to have 2 tenants in a duplex. Or if you're using a property manager, it's just going to be more expensive. So typically the cash flow from renting both sides can offset that. And I think most investors typically go towards using a property manager just because it is a big headache and hassle to deal with a lot of tenants and a lot of requests, things like that. So management wise, I'd say it's definitely easier to have a single family.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what, like being a landlord and understanding this is like when you have someone move out for one reason or another, whether it's just the end of their term and they leave, or it's, some hardship that they're going through, it's a bit of a showstopper. because now you're like, I got to get someone else in there. I don't want vacancy, because 1 month of vacancy can be like, say it's $2,000 your rent amount, like $2,000. That's like $200 a month, right? So if you've worked like for the last 4 years to raise the rent, a couple $100, like that can all be wiped out in 1 month of vacancy. So like the importance of like keeping that thing occupied and lining it up so there's someone else going in is huge. Like right now in the Denver market, just so you, like a little update for you, property managers across the board are saying this is one of the hardest times to rent a place out. And I'm hearing a little more comparison to like because what a lot of people don't realize is during the Great Recession, the real estate market dropped, like pricing dropped like 8 to 20% back then. But one of the most difficult things was that so many people got out of home ownership during that time, but there still wasn't a great rental market either. The rental market was super soft. And so like people would try to rent their place out, and there was so much listing inventory trying to rent that it made the market really soft, and there was no renters at the time. And so that was a really challenging time, because if you're underwater on your house, your next option is, well, rent it out. Let the market correct itself, which we know it did. Like by 2015, you would have made sweet money on that thing, right? But a lot of people couldn't hang on to it because they literally could not rent the place out without dropping the price to a position that they weren't comfortable in. So that's because I always think, like, why don't they just rent it out? Like if they, couldn't sell the place, and that's why the rental market dropped out too at the same time. So it was a tough time, and I'm starting to hear landlords, like, they're not talking quite like they did back then, but they are saying that like it's very difficult to find renters at the moment, and so like I just went through a challenge. It was 45 days for us to find a renter to move into our townhome that we have for rent, and it's a very average rent price, like $2,000 a month. It's not anything big or difficult to find, but 45 days to find someone to get there. After like 8 showings, we finally found someone. So that's kind of the landscape of what that looks like right now, and it's not always, and it's an ever changing thing depending on the market.
And I went and looked up, so Jackson, to your point, the turnover of tenants coming in and out. Single family homes, the average lease is a 12-month lease, but they're typically 2 to 3 years. Or like on a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, it's a 12-month lease, but it's 1.5 to 2.5 years. So you're going to have a higher turnover ratio. Going to Landon's point, vacancy, that 1 month of vacancy can really impact your projections, right? So, and most people in their CapEx will put in a 5% vacancy rate to try and help cover that, but it seems like it's probably increasing to 7. So
yeah, yep, definitely. So, so you look at this and you just kind of think, summary wise, like what's the best choice for new investors, people that are just getting into the market and investing for their first house? Because I think you're the most susceptible on your first investment. You're the most likely to make a big mistake and big pitfalls because you don't have experience to back you up. And so, for me, it would be single family. If you're just buying an investment property purely, I think buying single family is the way to go, because it's a lot bigger market buying pool. If you think about it, like when you go to resell an investment that's a duplex, it's all about numbers. It's very logical thinking. Single family homes, way more emotional, right? You get families that stay longer on single family homes, and it's just, there's more emotion there, where duplex is just hard numbers. It's a little more cutthroat, kind of more commercial, as far as that goes. And anything, just fun fact, anything above 4 units is considered actual commercial. We can still help people on the residential level with a residential real estate contract up to 4 units. Anything above that is, we would typically refer that off to a commercial agent at that point. Just so audience wise, like, who to call. But this is, one of those things. I would just say, if you're living in 1 unit and renting the other, probably the only time in your life that you will actually do that. And if you find a spouse or partner that's willing to go along the ride with you and do that, and even rinse and repeat it, like we do know, like, shout out to Mr. Williams,
yeah,
but like,
exactly.
we know someone that we helped, right, that ended up buying a place. It was a top bottom duplex. He lived in the bottom, which was a lot less desirable, like darker, less, like windows and everything. It just felt kind of cramped. And then he rented out the really nice top, and that ended up paying for pretty much his whole payment. And he did extremely well on that with a VA loan. And then he ended up renting both of those out, going to buy another one, and did the same thing with that one. And so he ended up having, 4 units that he owned, did a really good job with it, and then ended up selling 2 of those units, a duplex that was a side-by-side, down in the like Sobo area, and ended up buying like a really nice, $1.2 million home on a golf course after that, because he lived like nobody else for a long time, right? And then he was able to live like nobody else, like Dave Ramsey likes to say. So it was kind of a cool concept that we learned from. Not everybody's willing to do that. Everybody wants luxury lifestyle now, right, Gabby?
Yeah.
So especially nowadays, like I feel like everybody wants to be an influencer, right? That's like coming out of college right now, or like they want to, like the waiting for the reward to happen and working for it is not like the mantra in today's society. So
Delayed gratification.
you can delay your gratification longer. You'll get 2 marshmallows. That's the whole key. If you've heard of the Harvard study. Yeah. Awesome. So quick summary. What's best for cash flow? We can think. What's the answer?
Probably a duplex.
Duplex, definitely. Best for appreciation?
Single family.
Yeah, I agree. Best for ease of management?
Single family.
Single family for sure. Best for house hacking? Buying, like
Duplex.
living in one, renting out the other. A lot of people use that term of house hacking to do that. Absolutely. And I think the best option overall is house hacking. Because think about it, when you're house hacking and you live in one unit, you're only managing one side, just like you would with the other one, right? You just have to make sure that whoever you rent that to is going to be someone you want to live by. And if you're living there, you're going to take a lot of like thought into that and have accountability with that too, which actually helps you in the long run, right? You're not just renting it to 2 separate people you don't know and like, hey, good luck. It's like, no, I live here. I want someone that's going to be normal next to me, right? Or like is not going to drive me nuts. So that's, I think, a good point there. And then best long-term wealth. That one's tough. Because one is cash flow, one's appreciation, right? They're both great. But to me, the appreciation is what I'm most interested in, like over time. I feel like that's a big deal. And so for me, like the single family or single unit, type stuff is a little bit better for like creating long-term wealth, just because it grows at a higher rate of appreciation. And that over the long term, that compounding interest will make that a much more valuable asset, I think. But either are great. And then we'll wrap it up, guys, with some final thoughts. Anything that you guys have on your mind to close this out?
No, I think it's all a matter of what your experience level is and what you're willing to deal with. Mm-hmm. So, and both have their upsides. It's just a matter of where your strengths are, right? So last thing you want to do if you're not go to a dealing with people or an interviewing, to go with a multifamily, right? So single family, if you want an actual family to deal with, someone you can maybe more relate to, just depends on your season of life. So,
yep, definitely. And also a renter that's going to cause a bunch of trouble. They're not going to want to live right next door and share a wall with the actual owner of the property, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like in that, like the house hacking element, like attracts a good renter. Just a side note, but awesome. Well, if you're thinking about buying a rental property and you're debating whether it's single family or a duplex or a multi-unit, definitely give us a call. We're happy to, because like we said, there's philosophy behind this, but it all comes down to like the individual unit itself or units to know if this is a good investment or a bad investment. And we're here to help you navigate that and continue to get to know the real estate here in the Denver metro area. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.